Welcome to this EN 331 presentation on teaching grammar in the ESL classroom. In this lecture, you will learn the importance of teaching grammar, useful techniques and aids for CLT instruction, and key considerations to help you match your methods to the needs and abilities of your students. To begin, it's helpful to distinguish the role of grammar in linguistic communication. Grammar is the system of rules that determine how words are arranged in sentences. However, these rules are only one part of how communication is organized. Semantics, or the meaning of words in the context in which they are used, is also a key element of communication. Because these parts work together, it's important to teach grammar in a way that integrates these other elements so students stay interested and motivated. Over the last century, the importance of teaching grammar and methodologies for doing so have varied greatly, with some giving it a central place and others excluding it altogether. Today's consensus is that grammar instruction is not only helpful, but essential to rapid language learning, as long as it's done in a communicative style. To maximize classroom efficiency, teachers should make sure that their techniques create meaningful contexts, promote accuracy, are lively and engaging, and use simple language rather than complex terminology. A wide range of objects and prompts can be used to create a clear and meaningful context for students that gives them a sense of internal motivation and enthusiasm for communicating while using the rules that you're teaching. Some of these include charts. These map out the grammatical structures being taught with the formal explanation of the parts of speech parallel with a simple example. Keep in mind that visual analytical learners will get more out of these diagrams than holistic experiential learners. Objects that can serve as prompts to tell stories or engage in dialogue is also great. Students can be invited to bring in objects that have personal significance to them or be given objects and invited to participate in structured role play. These are good for giving students a feeling of personal investment in activities. Dialogues, either pre-written or personalized by filling in the blank, give students much needed practice in using the grammatical forms that they're attempting to master. These can also be tailored to fit the interests of the class around subjects that they identify with. While long texts can stifle the energy of a class by exhausting students' attention, focused interaction with short texts can help students learn to recognize grammatical structures in a wide variety of contexts. Students can circle examples of a particular tense within a paragraph. Writing can range from formal articles to songs that can be read and then listened to, so as to pair visual with oral recognition. When teaching grammar, there are some basic pedagogical pitfalls that teachers should definitely avoid. To maximize classroom effectiveness, here are some approaches not to take. Teaching grammar deductively. While it may be tempting to teach grammar by giving the rule first and then asking students to apply it, in-class experience and research shows that this deductive style slows students' learning and decreases their motivation. In contrast, if they're given examples that they can use to interact with and then asked to guess the rules on their own, it increases their internal motivation and lets them get a feel for the language without being overwhelmed by a lot of abstract rules. It is also how language acquisition occurs naturally, and therefore, most grammar teaching should be taught inductively by first giving the students a meaningful example of communication and allowing them to figure out the rules governing its organization. Another thing you don't want to do is use too much jargon or unfamiliar terminology. Sometimes students feel comfortable or reassured knowing the name and explanation for every part of a sentence. For the vast majority, this terminology and background is overwhelming. Research shows that in all cases, even if students feel reassured by hearing long explanations, it slows students down and reduces their motivation to learn. Therefore, keep in mind that your explanations of a particular rule should be as brief and simple as possible, and use clear, straightforward examples and language suited to the level of the students. You don't want to focus on exceptions or uncertainties. Don't allow questions about exceptions to the rule distract the class from learning the rule itself. If students persist in asking about exceptions, make it clear that the purpose of the lesson is to learn the rule, not the exceptions. Finally, if you're unsure of the answer to a question, don't fudge the answer or try to guess. This is a disservice to your students who depend on you for the correct answer. Instead, acknowledge that you're unsure and tell them you'll research the question and give them a thorough answer the next day. You also don't want to separate grammar from other aspects of language learning. Although in the past some researchers proposed teaching grammar in separate modules and courses, the consensus now is that students learn faster and more effectively if grammar is integrated into a class where they're learning the language holistically. Because of this, teachers should be discouraged from creating grammar-only courses or sections. However, for students who are preparing for certain tests like the TOEFL, it may be helpful to have a separate time to have grammar study as it relates to the portions of the test. For example, writing or speaking section in which they need to be able to tell a story like in the past tense. Finally, do correct but don't overcorrect your students. Studies show that directly explaining students' spoken errors in the classroom does not have a major impact on how they learn, but other kinds of attention does help. For example, repeating their sentence correctly or using the same grammatical structure correctly in your response while being sensitive to your students' emotional and intellectual situations is one example. This kind of example helps all the students learn to peer correct and self-correct, which is what you really want. The principle to keep in mind here is maintaining communicative flow. As long as you can correct errors without disrupting that, it's wise to do so. In writing, correcting each individual mistake does not have much impact, but noting patterns and giving feedback on types of mistakes that students make over and over can be useful. When coming up with a lesson plan for grammar that best fits your students, consider these 4 variables. Age. Adult students can benefit more from abstract explanations. Children, on the other hand, learn better through role play and examples, though very simple explanations like "this is how we talk about yesterday" can help children absorb a particular structure. That's not to say that role playing and examples aren't good for every age, because they are. Level of proficiency. Students at beginning levels can easily be overwhelmed by too much grammar, so with them it should not become a major focus. Occasional explanation, especially of basic necessary tenses such as present and past simple, can help. Intermediate and advanced students can absorb a much more focused study of grammar. Level of education. Students with more formal education have an easier time absorbing explanations of grammar than those who are either illiterate or unschooled. I also want to pay attention to the needs and goals of the students. The aims of the students should influence how much grammar you teach them. If they need to operate in a professional environment that includes formal writing and spoken presentations, they'll require much more focused grammar instruction than if they're learning English in order to survive and make themselves understood on vacation in an English-speaking country. The type of writing they will do also affects how much grammar that they'll need. Thank you for watching this EN 331 presentation on teaching grammar in the ESL classroom.